is from someone who is new to the world of working in the world of special ed.
Okay.
And they say, what types of assistance in your education journey did you appreciate the most? Did you struggle with behaviors that interfered with learning opportunities? And what can teachers, peers, and behavior analysts do to support you and similar kids with similar struggles?
Okay, let's take those questions one at a time. What was your first question?
So the first one is, what types of assistance in your education journey did you appreciate the most?
Did I appreciate the most? Well, we talked about the beanbag already. That was a really nice one, just having that sort of safe space I could go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if I used it a whole lot, but having that option there, knowing that I could go there if things got too awful,
yeah,
that was critical. Because I'm like, okay, can I handle this? Yes. If so, I can stick around. If I can't handle this, there's no shame in sneaking out.
You got a place to go, and you didn't have to sneak because you knew
exactly.
it was legit.
Well, I still wanted to sneak because I didn't want to disturb anybody.
Yeah. So I was thinking about your issues because academically you've always been so strong.
Yes.
You've always tested well. You've always retained information well. You've always synthesized information well.
That's always been my strength.
Your strength for sure. But I can say that with your brother, who has more classic autism,
mm-hmm.
he has had a lot of accommodations along the way. Everything from a ball chair to help with his sensory needs. And he had a ball chair in school, and he's had everything from extra testing time to we use subtitles in videos because he's more visual than auditory with his learning, and definitely having more one-on-one attention, especially in subjects where he wasn't as strong.
So that's why we use subtitles.
That's how we got started, and then I found out it really helped me
It's
too.
really nice, yeah.
Yeah, so now we use subtitles on all of our TV shows, movies, everything we do in the house. I love it.
Except sporting events.
Yeah, because that gets a little distracting.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, alright, so that's the types of assistance. Did you struggle with behaviors that interfered with learning opportunities? So were any of your idiosyncrasies or your behaviors, did they get in the way of your learning?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, it honestly really depended on the quality of the teacher. Because most teachers I had were, I'm not going to say totally, but at least reasonably understanding. I'm talking like high school.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that were like actually listened to what I had to tell them, those are the classes that I also did the best on, and that was most of them. Now, I've had a couple of teachers who were kind of assholes, and they were incompetent for like one reason or another. Either like I tried to tell them something, they wouldn't listen. So like my shop teacher, Mr. Hopkins, I think it was.
Well, let's try not to mention any specific.
No, I am calling you motherfuckers out right now.
Please stop.
But yeah, there was one time where like we left our projects on this shelf. Like, they were unfinished, so we sort of left them there overnight, came back the next day, and my project was not there anymore.
I recall.
And I'm not sure if it was because some asshole took it away while, some other student, or he misplaced it or something like that, but it wasn't there anymore, so I'm like, I don't know, was it supposed to be there? And I'm like, I really don't know this, because he said it's supposed to be there. I put it there, and it suddenly wasn't there. And I tried to tell him that, he wouldn't listen, and I ended up getting a B in that class. Or Miss Sutherland, who might have been possibly the worst teacher. No, not possibly. She was the worst teacher I ever had. Because she always thought she knew best, corrected me on stuff I said that was right, and generally kind of left it up to the students to run her class. In at least a couple of activities, and that really wasn't conducive to learning. And that was the only class where I ended up getting a C. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, look, I am a trivia player. I wasn't back then, but I've been good enough to be for a long time. I'm a Mensa member. I got basically A's in all of my other classes. And I actually put in some real, genuine effort for that class. And the fact that you still weren't able to teach me, that says a lot more about you than it does about me.
I was definitely an outlier, that C, because You know, that wasn't what you did. You just didn't get C.
No, I didn't.
Not that I cared.
I still don't.
Yeah, right. Not that I cared, but it obviously meant something to you at the time. I do remember one teacher that worked really well with you. Now, this was when we were in Georgia. And do you remember Miss Graybo? She was 4th grade, I want to say.
You remember the really bad ones?
No, you guys...
I remember the really bad ones anyway.
Oh, okay. This teacher came to me and she was so impressed with you because they were talking about the rock cycle or something, but you actually demonstrated for, I don't know if it was for the class or just for her or whatever, but you actually got up and you said, you know, like, no, I can't remember the rocks, but it's like metamorphic, and you did a certain movement or
oh yeah, I do remember you telling me about that at least.
She was so impressed because it was like you were taking what she was teaching and actually putting it into like,
use.
Yeah, into physical action and like demonstrating it, and she was like so impressed, and you guys really hit it off, and that was one of those teachers that I'm very thankful that you had because she seemed to really get you.
Yeah, see, I think the key for me is to have teachers that actually recognize my intellectual capability almost. Like, you think about the teachers I had as a kid, like who I would correct, and they took it as an insult.
Yeah.
And I just never hit it off with them because they were so arrogant. They thought they knew everything when they actually didn't. And then you compare that to some of the professors I've had in college who are experts in the field but also know that they don't know everything. Mm-hmm. And they kind of even use they got the Socratic method going, exchange of questions. They let me correct them and then they'll challenge those beliefs. And they almost treat me as, an intellectual peer. Mm-hmm. Not quite at that level, but they still recognize me as being, okay, this dude is smart, he knows what he's talking about, I can challenge him, but I'm not going to be take offense at something he says because I know I don't know everything.
So can you see that difference, that line though, that I was talking about earlier is, if you're a teacher and you've got 20 14-year-olds versus a teacher or professor with 20-year-olds. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different, children versus young adults perspective. And I think teachers that are used to...
But when it comes to academia, I've kind of been on that level for a long time. Yeah. So that was where...
I'm just glad
I guess I didn't recognize it.
I'm just glad you grew up.
Yes.
Because you were, as far as... I tried umpteen different ways of making you understand that everybody has a boss and that you just have to do certain things even if you don't feel like it and you can't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, the only help for this is to get him to be an adult because he's never going to see this. So the true revenge is going to be when you have your own children.
No.
Anyway, and they tell you where you can stick it. That's going to be the true revenge. And then we asked a similar question earlier, but what can teachers, peers, and behavior analysts do to support you or kids with similar struggles?
I guess just to understand where we're coming from, and I think part of it is also for us to be able to communicate where we're coming from when we can. Yeah. So I like when this happens, I don't like when this happens, and then if you manage to understand that, or if we manage to get that message across, then it kind of is on the people creating that environment to ensure that it actually is conducive to success.
So it's important to be listened to.
Yes. It's important for both, people on the spectrum like me to voice our concerns, and then people in charge to actually take those concerns seriously.
Yes. And I do remember from a parental perspective and going to your IAP meetings, one of the things that we learned to do over time was request a certain type of teacher. If there was a teacher who tended to be more confrontational or more not as laid back, then over time we learned to try to avoid those people. And
honestly, I think, why would you hire confrontational teachers anyway? Well, that's not a good idea.
No, and confrontational may not be the word. Here's more of a sound description. There are a lot of parents and teachers who are more like, because I said so, you're a child, you will do it, that's the rule, you will follow it. Mm-hmm. Those are the people we did not want to put you with.
The people who think that because they're older, that somehow makes them better.
But a lot of adults do feel that you're the subordinate.
Yeah.
Okay. So we learned to try to get you with teachers who are a little more flexible, a little more laid back. And that was when there was an option. Like if there's only one science teacher, you had to go with the science teacher. But if there were 2 English teachers and we got to pick which one would be a better fit, then we actually had those conversations behind the scenes. And I didn't necessarily know which one, and some of the behind the scenes conversations I was not a part of, but I did make requests that they consider those things before they placed you.
Yeah.
So, all right, doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. This is switching topic. I would like an opinion on how you feel, well, how he feels, how you feel toward other people's emotions. Do you sympathize with others? Do you empathize with others? And this was from a woman. I remember she said that she feels like her grandson does empathize with others, but she's curious how you feel about it.
So that's actually kind of interesting. So I'm going to go back, for example, to Infinity War, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. You know, Thanos did finish his snap. He wiped out half of all life in the universe. And I'm like, yes, yes, he did it, let's go! You know, everybody else around me was just crying, and I'm like, yeah, Thanos! But I think that's because I managed to mentally distinguish the misery of fictional characters with the misery of real-life people. Like, I sympathize with actual real-life people when they have problems.
Okay.
And, you know, I managed to connect with them. I might not know, like, what to say to comfort them.
Yeah.
I might have issues, but I do feel bad for someone when, you know, something bad happens to them and, you know, they need to be consoled.
Yeah, yeah. So you do. Now, let me ask you this, though. Let's say you're empathizing with someone and you're really feeling their pain or whatever, but then they go repeat the same.
Yes.
That's when you lose a little.
I lose a little bit of sympathy there,
yeah.
Because, especially if they like say, okay, I'm probably gonna be making the same mistake again, and then they make the same mistake again.
Yeah.
Because part of my whole thing is like, I very rarely make the same mistake twice. Like you think about, and I make it twice. I certainly don't make it a third time. Like, if I think about, you know, that fight or flight thing we mentioned earlier, I figured out that fight wouldn't work, so I turned to flight. That wouldn't work, so I just repressed my emotions until, you know, I eventually die.
Mm.
And that's basically the one thing that's worked for me so far.
Hmm. Well, do you let your emotions out ever?
Not really. At this point, I'm basically dead inside, so...
Do you feel like you're dead inside?
Kinda. I mean, there are times... I'll say it this way. The first time I watched Endgame, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I felt a lot more about the happy moments than I did about the sadder moments. And there were plenty of both.
So when things were happy, you were a bully, or you felt more upbeat, but when things were sad...
It was just, oh, that happened. Okay, cool.
So do you feel like hope, love, joy, happiness?
I do occasionally, yeah. I mean, I have a hard time like showing it, but I find it easier to feel happiness than I do to feel like sadness or anger. Especially like, you know, when something happens over and over again, and I'm going to get really dark here for a second, and you can like cut this out or edit it as you need to or whatever.
Go ahead.
But I think about mass shootings here in the States. Especially in like schools, and you know, the first couple times, you know, I heard of it, like, you know, Sandy Hook, the Orlando nightclub shooting, stuff like that. Parkland, yeah. I mean, not even Parkland. Parkland's actually more recent. That kind of falls into my later feelings. But the first shootings I saw, I'm like, oh, that's really sad. We need to do something because, you know, we can't allow this to happen again. And then the more it does happen again and again and again, I just stop feeling anything. Like, yes, those kids died. Honestly, who cares? We're just going to keep making the same mistakes, and we're basically... I liken it to going back to an abusive boyfriend. Because we say we've changed, we hope we've changed. There's never been any change, and nothing is going to ever change. And that's when I basically started suppressing those emotions, because honestly there's no point in feeling them, because nothing's ever going to happen to change that.
It's discouraging and frustrating.
Yeah.
It really is. You're not the only one that feels that way, though. I think, you know, the thing about who cares, of course, I know you don't mean that literally because of the poor children and their parents and
of
families
course,
and all that, but it's like, if we cared enough,
we would do something about it.
Yeah, and so apparently we don't. It's just okay. Well,
as opposed to New Zealand, which had a mosque shooting, and then just like automatically made some new legislative change to try to stop that. And I don't know if it's gonna work, but they're trying something.